Hey guys, this week's video is dedicated to all our brothers and sisters in the land of Israel. 1 week to our first Friday summer soiree, so if you haven't signed up yet, please do so. Come join us. Can't wait to see you. This week's Torah portion, Parshat Korach, we have the famous rebellion and challenge to Moshe's leadership from Korach and his followers. And it doesn't end well for him or his followers. But what's interesting is Moshe's reaction to this challenge is one that is very strong and aggressive, almost like really strong. In contrast to other times where it seems like there was a challenge to Moshe. We see not that long ago, Moshe appoints 70 elders to share the burden of judging the Jewish people and teaching the Jewish people. Just a couple weeks ago, we had the story of Eldad and Medad who were prophesying in the camp that Moshe was going to pass away and his student was going to take over. And Moshe was said, the more prophecy, the better. Moshe was happy to share the spotlight. Why was the case of Korach different? And the answer is there's a difference between power and influence. We associate the two, but there's a difference. We usually think that someone in influence has power and someone in power has influence. And while that may be true, they're very different ideas. Somebody in power, if they share that power with 9 other people, their power is diminished. Whereas somebody who influences and shares that influence with 9 others and gets them to then influence, he's just multiplied his influence by 10. Influence is about inspiring other people, lifting them up, and giving over a message. If you could share that and get other people to do that, you have just multiplied your influence. Whereas power, it's all about taking for oneself. And Moshe knew leadership is not about power. And that's why he was so strong against it. Moshe wasn't about power. Moshe was about influencing, lifting up, inspiring people, giving over God's message. That he was happy to share. Power doesn't belong to anyone. This Tuesday is the 30th yahrzeit of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, passing of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And a lot has been written and spoken about the Rebbe's leadership, the Moses of our generation. The Rebbe, you could say, was powerful. He knew a lot of powerful people and had the ear of a lot of people. But that's not what the Rebbe used. The Rebbe was all about influence. How to inspire, how to touch another person. How to lift them up to their best possible self. But even more than that, what made the Rebbe unique was it didn't stop with that person. The Rebbe wanted that person who was inspired to then go and touch other people, inspire the people around them. Keep that going, the domino effect. Keeps rippling out further and further and further. That's ultimate influence. Before there was the idea of influencer. Not just to give over a message where one person's inspired, but inspire that person to continue to inspire others around them, who will then inspire others around them, and so on and so forth. This was the Rebbe's legacy. I want to share with you a story that I read this morning. In 1970, there was a young boy from Israel, Yaakov, who ended up in a Chabad overnight camp in Montreal because he had some a Chabad grandfather, some connection. He himself wasn't Chabad. And he felt very out of place. He was an Israeli kid, didn't speak much English. He felt very lost. A learning teacher named Michal Slavin went into New York for his birthday to have a private audience with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, there's a kid in your camp, an Israeli boy, who's probably feeling very lost. Please take him under your wing, make sure he's integrated and he's comfortable in camp. He was shocked. He came back to camp, he found the boy, and he started preparing Yaakov for his bar mitzvah. And soon the other kids in his bunk realized, oh, he's really good at soccer. He started teaching them Hebrew. They were teaching him English. It was an amazing experience for him. It was such a great experience that instead of going back to Israel after the summer, he went to study in a Chabad yeshiva in Montreal. And he grew up to be a Chabad emissary. His name is Yaakov Biederman, and he is the Chabad rabbi in Vienna, Austria. And he shares the following story. So not only did the Rebbe influence him, and then he went on to move to Vienna, Austria, but he shares the following story that shows this amazing idea. He said in 1994, somebody came to his office. And this lady tells him, Rabbi Biederman, I know you think you're the first. You're the first Chabad emissary to Vienna, Austria, but you're not. You're the second. I was the first. And he says, who are you? And she says, my name is Margaret Chayat. I grew up before World War II. I came from a Hasidic family of rabbis. And I came to Vienna, Austria, and I became an opera singer. And I performed with the Vienna Orchestra. I was an opera singer. Until World War II, when I had to escape, I was smuggled out. I made it to the United States, where I lived in Detroit, Michigan. After a bunch of years, I had the opportunity to meet the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And I poured out my heart to him. I told him my whole life story. And I told him that I was contemplating going back to Vienna to perform opera. And he said, before you go, please let me know. I have an important message for you to give over. So before she left to Austria, she met with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told her like this: when you get to Austria, when you get to Vienna, I want you to seek out, there's a professor named Viktor Frankl. I want you to find him, and I want you to tell him in my name not to give up, not to take any criticism personally. He should stick to, the message that he's giving over, the therapies that he's doing, and he should stick with it and not worry about the criticism. I didn't know who Viktor Frankl was. At that time, Viktor Frankl was not a well-known person. She said, I came to Vienna. I came to the university, and they said, he hasn't been to work in 2 weeks. We can't tell you more about that. She said, I was determined. I finally tracked down his home address, and I came to his house. And he opened the door. And I told him, the Lubavitcher Rebbe sends regards. And he says, who's that? She said, it's a rabbi in Brooklyn. He said, I've never heard of him. Says, well, I'm going to tell you his message. His message is not to give up, not to be worried about the criticism, not to take it personally, to stick with it, to stick with what you're doing. He was shocked. He started crying. Viktor Frankl invited her in. I said, you have no idea what you just did, what the Lubavitcher Rebbe just did. At that time, Viktor Frankl, who had grown up as a student of Freudian theory, but after his experience in Auschwitz, broke with Freudian theory and developed his own logotherapy, which was based on the premise that what drives humans is not the drive of pleasure, but the drive to seek meaning, to live meaningfully in any experience that they find themselves. And while it hadn't taken off yet, he was heavily criticized by colleagues who laughed at this idea that he was presenting to the world. And at his lectures, he was heckled. And this really bothered him. And he was taking it very hard. He told Margaret, he said, I was through Auschwitz. I've been through everything. But this was really getting me down. So much so, he said, I was ready to resign. He showed her on his desk, he had immigration papers to Australia. He had planned to leave Vienna and move to Australia, leave it all behind, because he couldn't take the criticism anymore. He says, now that you just gave me this message from this rabbi that I never knew and I never met, I'm going to stick with it. And not that long after, he printed his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, which became one of the most 10 influential books of the last 100 years. This is the story Margaret was sharing with Rabbi Biderman. Now, Rabbi Biderman, it's 1994, he knew about Viktor Frankl, and he said, I have to verify this story. And he called Viktor Frankl. He was able to track him down. He was then in his 90s. And Viktor Frankl said, absolutely, this story is true. When he heard that he's a Chabad rabbi, he said, you should know, I've been sending you money every single year, a donation. Why? Because once I heard there was a Chabad representative here, I wanted to take part. I never met the Rebbe, but the Rebbe changed my life, and in that way, touched tens of millions of people around the world. My friends, influencing, it's not the term that you think it is. Every person can be an influencer. Reach out to somebody else, inspire somebody else, giving over a message. It's not about power, it's not about clicks, it's not about views. It's about lifting somebody up so that they in turn can lift up the people around them, and we can change the world for the better. Shabbat Shalom.